So going forward now and looking at what is next on our program, we've got Michael Davies, CEO of ContinuitySA, and of course, our main partner, sponsor for the day. Michael, thank you so much for always supporting us. This is a first. Over the last few years, you and I, we've traveled around the country. Today, we're on this very new platform that we find to be very exciting. So Michael, over to you. Looking forward to hearing what you've got to say this morning.
Excellent. Thank you, Gillian. And thanks to Berenice for the introduction this morning. Thanks to Chris for being involved. I see Chris is clean shaven, obviously something given some thought to with regards to being on camera. So it's an exciting week, looking at our various challenges and enjoying a digital conference, something very different. And from ContinuitySA, we really appreciate partnership with IRMSA on this. There will be a couple of glitches along the way, I'm sure, as we've seen people not turn on mute or not turn off mute buttons on mics, cameras and things like that. But it's a brave new world, and it's quite interesting in the challenges that we have to deal with. So let's have some fun and let's learn stuff, as has been said. So I want to talk around building resilience into the agile company of the future. Michael Davies, CEO of ContinuitySA, and we bring 30 years of experience into business continuity and building resilience. And we'd like to share some insights, and more specifically over the last couple of months, what we've seen happen, what's good, what's bad. And the theme being business continuity management is not a project, it is a culture. Absolutely right. Business continuity management is not a start, or does not have a start and an end. It's infinite. And most companies are looking at ways to improve its BCM culture over time. It is no coincidence that we're doing this digital conference during Business Continuity Awareness Week. So it's a global event from Monday to Friday this week, where risk managers, business continuity practitioners all get together, sharing ideas and experiences, grow an awareness to the greater part of our companies. And the theme for the Global Business Continuity Awareness Week is We Are Stronger Together. So very nice theme, very strong theme in this time. We live in a VUCA world. For years, I've been speaking about a VUCA world. It is volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. And I've been given many great examples to work with over the years. And we've had our own local examples in terms of political unrest. We've got international examples with President Trump. We've got the US and China tariff wars. There are just so many good examples of why our world is just so volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Another one a couple of years back would have been the volcanic ash, the volcano in Iceland, blew volcanic ash into the air and grounded the airline industry basically over Europe, which led to a bit of chaos and panic and people battling to get around. That wasn't that long ago, and it seems that a lot of people have forgotten lessons learned in that. So I've been speaking about a VUCA world for some time now, and I've been given one of the best examples to work with in terms of a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, which is called the coronavirus pandemic, or the COVID-19 crisis. So yes, you'll get to hear a lot of that today. If you turn on news media, Sky News, CNN, local ENCA, 90% of the time it's focused on the current COVID-19 situation. So we expect we're going to hear quite a lot of it today. So let's understand the coronavirus crisis just a little bit better. It seemed to have a fairly innocuous start in December 2019 in Wuhan in China. From there, it literally exploded across the world, and the Northern Hemisphere was affected first, spreading out from China through to India, Going across Europe, countries like Italy and Spain were very badly affected, and moving across to the United States, where they have the most amounts of infections at the moment. Globally today, there are approximately 5 million cases of infections, with over 300,000 deaths. In South Africa, we have about 18,000 infections that have been identified, and as a cause of death, we have about just over 300 deaths at the moment. So, why we're talking about it, and in some small way, is because Africa came on the scene a bit later in terms of the infection explosion, is we do have some learnings from the Northern Hemisphere. And so why we're talking about it is in terms of business continuity and building resilience, it's had a global impact on our businesses and individuals. There are far-reaching local consequences, as can be seen by the lockdown regulations and what we can and can't do. And we really do believe that the future will be different. Is we are not going to go back to business as usual, or what was the same as before. However, there are some very important lessons to be learned during this pandemic, and they are useful for other disruptions as well, not just during the pandemic. So if we look at the World Economic Forum, they do a global risk report, and in terms of their 2019 global risk report, their top 5 risks in terms of likelihood, so possibility of happening. Number 1 was extreme weather events. The second one was failure of climate change, mitigation and adaptation. The third one was natural disasters. Fourth being data fraud and theft. And the top of the last of the top 5 was cyber attacks. So that's what they expected to see during the course of 2019. And then in terms of impact, number 1 in terms of impact were weapons of mass destruction. So it did not have a high likelihood, didn't rate in the top 5 in likelihood, but it was number 1 in terms of impact. If there was a war as such, we understood from the World Economic Fund risk report that would have the most impact. Then there were a couple of more familiar ones. So number 2 being failure of climate change, mitigation and adaptation, and that was number 2 in likelihood as well. Number 3 being extreme weather conditions, so it's high impact, and it was number 1 on likelihood. And number 4 being water crises. And then number 5 being natural disasters. So you'll see quite a few have high impact as well as high likelihood, but there's nothing there that screams global pandemic. So in 2019, there were no real indicators, and most people would have spoken about pandemics in terms of, well, they have a high impact, but low likelihood. To be fair to the World Economic Forum, in the Global Risk Report, they did dedicate an entire chapter to infectious disease and spoke of the growing risk of pandemics. And on the basis of previous examples with SARS, Ebola, and the likes of those infectious diseases which affected countries as opposed to the whole world. So they did have one eye on it, but overall, the world was unprepared. So we as individuals were unprepared for the COVID-19 crisis. Our companies were unprepared. Countries were unprepared, and the world in general was just unprepared for the magnitude of the global coronavirus crisis. Close at home, IRMSA do a fantastic annual risk report, which is very good reading and gives great insight. And of their 12 top risks for 2020, I picked 6 which more or less were in line with regards to the World Economic Forum, and some of the others were more localized risks. They spoke of governance failures, extreme weather events, natural disasters, climate change. So you can see the similarity to the World Economic Forum report. Got disruptive technologies, cyber attacks, data fraud, data theft, changes in legislation and regulations, and a lack of unified ethical and visionary leadership. So a couple of new ones to consider. But again, there's nothing there that's screaming a global pandemic as a risk for 2020. So just going back to the point of we were unprepared. COVID-19 hits us across the world and came to Africa. So in South Africa, what did that mean for us? So the consequences of a COVID-19 pandemic for us is we went into lockdown. Government regulations went into level 5 lockdown, and the impact on us is firstly globally, the economy is in downturn, countries are going into recession. Another lockdown issue would be travel constraints. So personally, for us to travel across provincial borders becomes a challenge, and in fact, a regulation that you cannot do it. And travel constraints in terms of business for multinational companies who do tons of business travel across the world. It all came to a grinding halt. We got put into a situation of business unusual. Suddenly this work from home, doing digital conferences, Zoom fatigue, all those kind of things, we're now dealing in business unusual. And unfortunately, a number of industries have been hit particularly hard. Berenice spoke of the automotive industry a short while ago. The aviation industry was literally grounded. Many airline companies are going into business rescue or close to liquidation, and we have fleets and fleets of planes sitting on the ground. Tourism, unfortunately, it's another area that's been hit hard globally, not only in South Africa. And if you can't travel, you can't go out. The other aspect to it was social distancing and the physical distancing, so hotels are empty. So there have been a number of industries that have been closed effectively with the lockdown. And then, of course, the highly debated and controversial no tobacco, no alcohol. So not only does it mean you can't have your favorite cigarette and drink, but it means that industries are affected. And there are quite a few stories about the wine industry as to having cargo at the ports but can't export, impacting their businesses. So still in lockdown, some of the consequences, and more on an individual basis, is we can't visit family and friends. However, on the other side of it is it's given us a greater connection in that a lot of family and friends are now talking to each other more, but through Skype, Zoom, just by phone. Another unfortunate consequence of the lockdown is it's created a great deal of fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. So going back to that whole VUCA concept, and again, it's global. It's the fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. The fear of the contagion of this disease, how you get it, the fear of that it affects elderly people or those prone to immunodepressive kind of diseases. Anxiety about what's going to happen next, and the uncertainty around it. It's almost a bit of a comedy with regards to the President Trump in the United States and his statements that he has made publicly, beginning with many months ago that the whole coronavirus pandemic is a hoax, to maybe we should be using disinfectants to cure ourselves of the disease. And the latest is that he's on anti-malarial drugs to prevent becoming infected. It's that uncertainty in the medical profession, uncertainty in the lockdown. In South Africa, we have levels 1 all the way through to 5, currently on level 4, hoping to reduce to level 3 in the future, but there's still that uncertainty. They talk about flattening the curve, and if the curve doesn't flatten in terms of the infection rate, we will still be in lockdown, and it could go back to level 5. So again, fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. What we have discovered is what was once taken for granted can no longer be taken for granted. Our freedom, in terms of being allowed out, in terms of exercising, if we have a curfew in place in the evening and are not being allowed out, and we may be allowed out in the morning for 3 hours every day. So what we once took for granted is no longer there. Another element that's come into it is the social and physical distancing. It's hit us again personally in that we can't visit family and friends. We drive around in cars with no more than 2 people if it's a normal family sedan. And it's given us limitations on what we can and can't do, and restaurants being closed. It's very difficult to socialize. From a work perspective, companies have had to change how they have employees at site in the offices. And that has a big impact on the business. So these are things that we know. So what are the lessons that we've taken out of it? And gone through, we've had a couple of months of lockdown. We've had a couple of months of the coronavirus, the impact across the world globally. So what can we take out of this? And these lessons can be applied to other disruptions as well. They're not just pandemic related lessons. Firstly is act swiftly and decisively. And that's companies, governments, in terms of getting regulations out and in terms of communication, but act swiftly and decisively. Is decide the path that you're going to follow and do it. If you prevaricate and take time to make the decisions, they will be made for you in terms of regulations and what you can and cannot do. If we consider when we went into lockdown, we basically had a couple of days in order to get everything right with regards to companies. From then on, it was locked down. We had a good idea that the lockdown was coming, but we effectively had a week to put things in place before it was in lockdown. Another lesson learned is companies are accelerating their digital strategies. If we look at certain sectors, such as the financial sector, specifically banks, they're well ahead of the curve on digital strategies. Is they know they can connect with their clients by their phone, by mobile devices, and they have strong, robust IT systems in place so that they can still do business even though you cannot see your client. So relying on technology. Having this technology in place is really important to have a robust ICT infrastructure, and the systems to support it is to have the correct backup in place should systems fail, and also to have the correct redundancy in place of the systems so that you can continually provide services in a digital world. And it's really important because clients are fickle. We go online, and if we cannot get something by a certain provider, we'll move on to the next one. So really important to have that infrastructure in place for companies. And then with more work from home and people working from their own devices, it has led to vulnerabilities in terms of security. So a renewed focus on cybersecurity is necessary to take us to the next level. And that helps in building that resilience. Now, obviously, various industries have various abilities and capabilities on that digital strategy and how far they can go. It is something that most companies should be looking at and deciding what is their next strategy on that. Further lessons learned is communication is important. Communication, if you think in terms of family, everybody wants to know you're right, and you want to know that your family is right. So communication is important. In terms of companies, is stakeholders, clients, suppliers, that communication to everyone and your employees as to what is happening not only with your company, but in the greater community, what is going on. So that communication becomes very important the more remote people become and the more work from home. Another thing that tends to become invisible when there's such focus on the current pandemic is that normal disruptions still occur. Berenice earlier spoke of fires, floods, and things like that. Yes, these things still happen. Power outages. In fact, with a stronger work from home contingent of employees, is power outages in your home become more of a risk than they were before. And you have a number of different disruptions for various companies that still need to be considered. Global interdependency is a reality, with countries closing borders. Consider your supply chain. Consider where your clients are. I touched very briefly on the wine industry and getting their crates of wine to the port. But because of closed down of borders, they cannot export. So they have a dilemma. It has led to a rise in local manufacturing, and one needs to consider what is the way forward, given global interdependency. And in our experience at ContinuitySA, and it's not just over the last couple of months, but over the years, our experience has been that those organizations with practiced business continuity plans have managed better. They have been quicker to recover, and they've managed through this process better than those with limited or no business continuity plans. Those are some of the lessons learned, and this is the fun part of the presentation this morning. Is I'd like some participation here. I have 3 questions, and since we had to learn from each other and learn from the presenters and get insight to where we are with regards to the pandemic, I'd like to ask you, when do you think South Africa will no longer be under any lockdown regulations whatsoever? So you have the facility to answer. It's multiple choice, gives you a couple of answers. Please may I ask you to punch in your answer, and I will give you instant feedback on that. So it's great, thanks. We're getting a number of responses in. So the question is, when will South Africa no longer be under any lockdown regulations whatsoever? So that means we don't have level 1, 2, 3. It's almost back to normal. Right, I'm going to end the poll. There's been some great contributions. Thank you very much. So I shall end the poll now. And the feedback to you is that 11% of the audience said that we will be out of lockdown before September 2020. 35% believe that before March 2021. And the majority, a slight majority at 52%, say that we'll be out of lockdown after March 2021. Okay, well that's great insight, and thank you for participating in that question. So our peers are telling us, most of us believe that lockdown will only be over after March 2021. So given that insight from our peers today, and a lot of people were looking at 35% saying after, well, before March, but after the end of the year, and most of us are saying it's after March 2021. What does this mean for your business? And have you ensured business continuity for that prolonged period? We've had 2 months. We're now looking at going into 2021. Have you considered what that means for your business? So in most cases, people tend to think of business continuity as a recovery in a short period of time, but we're now in for a prolonged period. The business landscape has changed. We're not only looking at risks, but what are the new opportunities in this new business landscape, and that we're going to be in lockdown for such a long time. And lastly, then, the future will be different. How are you planning for it? We're saying lockdown is going to go beyond March 2021. So another year of lockdown. So thank you for participating in this one. If I may ask you to join us in this one too, my question to you is, will the post-lockdown world be the same, worse or better than the 2008 financial crisis? So 12 years ago, some of us may not even remember the 2008 financial crisis, but it had a severe impact on the world. Countries were recessionary. Unemployment went to an all-time high, and in fact it took many years, and I would argue a decade, before we pulled back to a different world. And there were no longer the booms. In the last 10 years, we have not seen the booms that we had seen in the early 2000s. Right, once again, I'm getting great information in. Thank you for the answers. I'll give you a couple more seconds to finalize your answer. And I shall end the poll now. Great, thanks for your participation. So the scary thing here is 88% of our audience today says that the post-lockdown world will be worse than the 2008 financial crisis. So that's a very scary thought, so a very sober thought. And I would then ask you to consider if that is our future scenario. And there was a small amount of people who said that it will be better than the 2008 financial crisis. So depending on your view of the future scenario, and this is our opinion. This is not fact. This is us as peers together sharing our thoughts. And most of us think that it'll be worse than the 2008 financial crisis. So depending on that future scenario, what are the plans are you putting in place now? I spoke of lessons learned, and important lesson is act decisively and act swiftly. You cannot wait for the future to happen to you. You need to be the master of your own destiny in terms of a company moving forward. And just another thought would be, while managing the crisis now is important for survival, there are a number of companies that are fighting for survival. However, you need to spend time on strategy for the future as well. And I'll have a lot of people saying, well, if you don't survive now, there is no future. But what if you do survive? Will you always be and continually be in survival mode, or will you spend some time on strategy for the future? Right. Last question from me for the morning is, my question to you is, will the risk officer of organizations have more say in the overall company strategy in the future due to the current global pandemic crisis? A simple yes or no. And what we're looking at here as risk practitioners, as business continuity practitioners, as professionals in the field of resilience, risk, where do we think the risk officer will sit? And where do we think our input in terms of organizational strategy in the future will sit? Once again, I'm getting great response. Thank you. I'll give it a couple of seconds and end the poll. Right, so I'll end the poll now. Right, great news to everyone. If you are in the risk profession, you've chosen the right vocation in life. 90% of us in participation of this conference today, so that the risk officer of the future will have more say in overall company strategy because of this. So if there is one silver line into this dark cloud called COVID-19, is that we as risk professionals will have more say in company strategy going forward. But what are you going to do about it? So my advice to you is, when considering the strategy for the future, is build that risk and resilience into the overall strategy of the company. Business continuity is not an element that is put to the side and run as a separate division. Business continuity is endemic to the whole company, and building that resilience into the agile new company of the future, we put in this duty on your shoulders that you get into the strategy of the company. Align IT and business, and in addition, incorporate a good, strong cyber resilience strategy. When looking at the overall company strategy, please get the balance right between risk appetite and resilience. Building resilience costs, and with unlimited resources, we could have the most resilient company in the world. Unfortunately, resources are limited in terms of finance, people, and time. And one needs to weigh up what is the company's risk appetite and get the correct resilience approach to it. I would also strongly suggest that you create a holistic resilience culture within the organization. And what that means is everyone in the organization is responsible for the resilience of that company in some small way, and that they are aware of what the steps are in place should there be disruptions. And in terms of value, because quite often in your profession you'll be asked, well, what value are you bringing to the company? There have been case studies done in the past, and in fact it's very demonstrable at the moment in terms of companies that are surviving better are those who've had good practiced business continuity management in place, good practiced business continuity plans. They have survived the pandemic crisis a bit better. Right, as I'm close to time, I'd just like to leave you with some last recommendations on building that resilience into the great agile company of the future that you will be part of. So we see the light. There is some sunshine, there is light ahead. And building that resilience, some ideas is no one business continuity plan fits all companies. Obviously different industries and different companies will have different plans. In an industry, there may be similar plans, but your plan for your company must be unique. It must fit your company. Practice, practice, practice is, we have found those companies that have practiced their business continuity planning have managed to survive disruptions in the past, and as demonstrated at the moment through the pandemic, they've been the ones to, if not survive, thrive. At ContinuitySA, we also suggest and recommend a 3-tier work approach for social distancing. So with regards to the lockdown and even into a post-lockdown era, is that most offices, because of social distancing, have obviously curtailed the amount of people in the offices, or their normal offices. What we have found and where we've helped our clients is with alternate site strategy, is they've used work area recovery where they've brought some people to our offices to carry on working where there is social distancing, and they've employed the home working strategy as well. So effectively having a third of their workforce at their regular site, a third at our alternate site, and a third at home. So it does spread the risk, and it does seem to work quite well. It's about the people. So building resilience, it's about the people. Empower the people, care for the people, and trust the people. So plans are important, but they are empowered by people. And if you want success in terms of business continuity, ensure that you've got the right people and the right teams in place. Unity and collaboration is important. Unity in terms of people in companies, people in countries, getting together. At the moment, we have a common cause, the fight against the COVID-19 virus. And collaboration, it's been very interesting to see that competitors are collaborating during this unprecedented time, this business unusual. More on a personal note is, please be patient, be positive. This too will pass, as have other pandemics. Unfortunately, it takes time. And lastly, on the point of today's theme, I end where I began, is business continuity management is not a project. It's a culture. It should be endemic to your company. It should be felt all the way through, and it's something you can continually improve on. So the road ahead, I see the sunshine on the road ahead. It's a long road ahead, but as South Africans, we are a resilient nation. We're a strong nation, and beyond South Africa, is countries are coming together well, and people are standing strong. So a thought to leave you with is, what defines us is how well we rise after falling. So thank you very much, Chris. I don't know if there are any questions. I may have spent a little bit more time than I thought I would have. But thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Michael. Just wanted to quickly, there are a number of questions that came through. Thank you for, to the audience. Please keep on sending your questions through. Need to respond to one quickly from Walter. Walter's asking, are we going to keep a log of the questions, and will we be answering all of these? Indeed, we will. So Michael, I'm going to ask you 2 out of the lot that I've received. If it's possible, if you could respond if you could maybe just on the chat box, just respond to some of those. But there are two really important ones I quickly want to deal with. We've got 2 minutes. The one was quite interesting from Fulufutzani. What is the future of disaster recovery sites now that we've learned that we can even have critical staff working from home? What's your response to that, Michael?
Thanks, Chris, and a fantastic question, and it's one that we keep asking ourselves. So what we found, and I mentioned it in my presentation, the 3-tier approach is a lot of our clients have looked at their offices. In fact, some of our clients are even looking at reducing their required office space and spreading the risk such that some of their staff work from our alternate sites. So those DOS sites that you speak of, we're currently very busy because we have clients on site who've deployed that 3-tier approach whereby they have a third of their staff on site. They've employed social distancing, they do the usual hygiene factors at our sites. We carry another third of their staff, and they have a third working from home. So the DR strategy is in fact stronger than it's ever been before because people are getting better use out of that strategy at the moment. And going forward into the future is I would suggest that companies look at maybe this managed office space solution whereby they look to outsourcers like ourselves, where you have staff there every single day and you have an element which is your working recovery for DR and an element which is your normal satellite office, which is in place for some of our clients already. So I think, sorry, Chris, I think the DR site strategy going forward is actually very strong for the future.
Excellent. Okay, Michael, again, just a reminder, if you could respond to the questions in the chat box, but Mark and Retseletshiso are highlighting quite an interesting concern here. Mark's slightly different, but I want to focus on Retsy's. Checking an assumption with you, Michael. If BCM, as you've shared with us, is part of culture and not so much part of compliance, and given the difficulty within the public sector to change culture, would you think that rolling BCM out successfully in the public sector will be a huge challenge? Just checking the assumption there.
Yeah, thanks. So firstly, it's compliance is still compliance, and BCM falls into compliance. What we're saying is, in order to strengthen your resilience, in order to strengthen your BCM, is you need to have an endemic culture within any organization, whether it's public sector or private, through everyone that has an understanding or awareness of business continuity. So it is a big challenge, and in public sector, part of the challenge is that BCM is put in a corner. It's put into a division, and basically they're told, you deal with it. We'll carry on with what we need to do. So it's quite difficult because it is separated from the other departments and other people. So what needs to be done, and it is a challenge, is to win over those in charge, that you can have greater awareness throughout all public sector entities and departments.
Thank you. And as we know, nobody puts baby in the corner. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Gillian.
All right, thanks. Thank you.
Michael. Thank you, Michael. Really good to see you. And I really do hope that for BCM next year, we will be on the road again. Looking forward to that.